Guatemala because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Oh no, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. I know we should always help we neighbor, especially in time of a natural disaster. But this is not the case with Guatemala because the poor people will never say a dollar. Only a few rich man will start to get richer. Today, Prime Minister be happy, write a letter because
Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans.
God have mercy.
Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans.
This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Oh no, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Not an inch, not a foot, not a centimeter. We not go give up to Guatemala because look what them do to the people of my color. If them speak too loud, sure to get murder. Look what them do to the Indian Maya. Holy by them massacre. La mismo presidente quiere we hago because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Oh no, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Belize if you need me, if you need a soldier, just send for the Cooper, cause I'm a true warrior. Just send for Daddy Tracy and Rankin Jr. Just send for Bernie Mac and Kenny M. my brother. Send for Andy P, send for the Mad Rapper. Just set to Stone Jam, you are the commander. Because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. So listen to the lyrics where Papa a chat. Some people only see ya, some see further than that.
Marin, and welcome to Sunday Review, Belize's only news review talk show. Oh yes, so well devoted. Here behind the fence at XTV, simulcasting on Prime Radio. You could go to YouTube or Facebook XTV Belize channels, and you'll be an active participant. I'm the producer and host of Sunday Review. The tag is Making Sense of the News. Our co-host since the beginning of this year, a revolutionary brother out of Trinidad and Tobago, brother Ako Mutota. Morning, brother Ako.
Morning, Sister YaYa, and morning to Dr. Edwards. It is a pleasure to have Dr. Edwards on this morning, and it's good to see you again, Sister YaYa, and good morning to our listening audience.
Thanks, and as Brother Ako said, our guest this morning.
Dr. Adams, I said Edwards, Dr. Adams.
That's all right. I hope there is a Dr. Edwards out there who's gonna be
Dr. Vince Adams.
Really pissed off that you that you defaming him.
Dr. Vince Adams, sorry.
Hey, Brother Ako, I like how they start off with a good laugh. That always helps. Our guest this morning is that Brother Ako said this, the illustrious Guyanese. Brother Doc Vincent Adams, Petroleum and Environmental Engineer. Morning, brother. Welcome to Sunday Review.
Good morning, YaYa and Ako and all of our wonderful listeners around the Caribbean. And hopefully we're gonna have an enjoyable program this morning as usual.
I am sure of it with this small talk we had already. I am certainly looking forward to this conversation. And remember, this year Sunday Review is intentionally focusing on the Caribbean. So because the Caribbean, people don't know how I go. Creole is my first language and my heart language. When our African ancestresses and ancestors came and talked the indigenous languages from the continent known as Africa. And then in our colonized state, whether the British, for instance, colonized you, they had to come up with a language to make them understand one another, and the Creole. So Creole is a language of resistance. The majority of people that believe talk Creole. So that's why I talk Creole, and all the way understand each other. So I know that I'm comfortable with that. Brother Ako tell me, one thing Brother Ako tell me about this brother, because Brother Ako had Caribbean dialogue before. And he tell me, I know one thing he tell me about the brother, I said, get on right away. So that's why the brother there. But to know how we start off the Sunday morning, Brother Ako, I call Brother Ako, among other things, our Caribbean correspondent. So Brother Ako, even though, I don't want to tell you Brother Ako business, just say the who right now, right? It don't have big celebration spots. But even so, I'm like, yes, then I got into that dial there. You still need to come on and co-host. So it got big report for you today. Brother Ako, what happened around the Caribbean we weren't hearing about?
Well, we have good morning again, Dr. Adams and Sister YaYa. We have 4 pieces of information I think is important. And I will begin with the first one. It's about a book, and you know I love books. So it's a new book, and it's called Dark Laboratory, and it's considered a groundbreaking book, and it argues that the climate crisis was sparked by colonization. And I think it's relevant because we are going to discuss the environment, and it is relevant to Belize because Belize has environmental issues that this is dealing with constantly. So to read it out in her new book, Dark Laboratory, Ta Le Goff, a writer of Caribbean descent born in the UK, but who now teaches in the US, argues climate breakdown is the mutant offspring of European scientific racism and colonialism. Dr. Goff claims we all think we know what is causing the breakdown of the planet's climate, burning fossil fuels that release carbon dioxide, change the chemistry of air, and trap more heat from the sun, leading to rising temperatures. However, Dr. Goff wants us to visualize a far more specific cause: the shunting of a ship's prow onto the sandbank of a paradise island in 1492. In Dark Laboratory, her groundbreaking new book, Goff argues that it was the colonization of the Americas by Christopher Columbus that set off the chain of events that has led us to where we stand today on the precipice of global catastrophe. Climate breakdown, she says, is the mutant offspring of European scientific racism and colonialism, concealed in the suffering of millions of Africans, Asians, and indigenous Americans endured at the altar of capital accumulation. Climate crisis is, put simply, also a racial crisis, and it is the only one, and it is only once we come to terms with this, Goff argues, and what it means for the ways we relate to the world and each other today, that we can help to find a solution. So that is the first article. I think it's an important perspective coming from a young Caribbean academic, Dr. Tao Goff, whose parents are from Jamaica. So it lends a whole different perspective to what we perceive to be the cause of the climate crisis. The second piece of news, yesterday, April 5th, I was present at the Buxton Ball Ground in Guyana to celebrate the 100th birthday of Guyanese and Caribbean icon, elder brother Yussi Quayana. Quayana is a historic figure in radical politics in the Caribbean. He was born Sydney King and was a pivotal figure in the Guyanese independence struggle and was deemed seditious by the British, arrested and detained. Brother Quayana and others, being deemed subversive by the British colonial authorities, were subjected to being arrested in 1953. Quayana at one time was a minister of government who later left electoral politics and founded the ASCREA, the African Society for Relations with Independence. After making a trip to Africa, he changed his name from Sydney King to Yussi Quayana, which means in Swahili, Black Man of Guyana. ASCREA was a pioneering organization in promoting African consciousness in Guyana and the wider Caribbean. Quayana later returned to politics when he co-founded the WPA, the Working People's Alliance, with the late Walter Rodney and others. After the assassination of Rodney, he was forced to leave Guyana for the US when his life was threatened. Yesterday, he returned to Guyana after more than 2 decades abroad to celebrate his 100th birthday in the village of Buxton, where he lived from childhood to adulthood. It was a historic moment, and among the audience was former President of Guyana, a former President of Guyana, a former Prime Minister of Guyana, and the legendary Caribbean singer Eddie Grant, who spoke about the impact Quayana had on him, a 5-year-old, before he left for the UK. The event had tributes to Quayana in the form of speeches and artistic performances. In his birthday address, he called on Guyanese to initiate a one-day fast to promote betterment for the Guyanese nation. It was indeed a special occasion, and I was overjoyed to be present in Buxton yesterday. Coming out of Haiti, there's a report April 2nd, gunfire as thousands protest to denounce a surge in gang violence. Thousands of protesters in Haiti have clashed with police as they denounce a surge in gang violence and demand that the government keep them safe. Gunfire erupted as thousands of protesters in Haiti clashed on Wednesday as with police on Wednesday as they denounced a surge in the ongoing gang violence and demanded that the government do something to keep them safe. At least a dozen heavily armed um, protesters, it was reported, opened fire on officers who responded outside the offices of the Prime Minister and the Transitional Presidential Council. A journalist on the scene said they did not see anyone injured or killed. It is the first major protest to hit the administration of Alex Didier Fils-Aimé, whom the council appointed as Prime Minister in November. As we all know, there has been ongoing violence in Haiti against regular folks by the gangs. And some were asking why the people didn't do anything about it. But it seems finally that people had enough and they decided to act on their own because they felt that the police and the authorities were not doing anything. And the response was that the police clashed with the protesters who were demanding some kind of accountability by the government for their inaction. Another report out of Dominica, the police arrested at least 10 people following protest action that escalated into violence in Roseau last week. Among the latest arrests were 3 women. On March 19th, police used tear gas to disperse a crowd of demonstrators who reportedly attempted to break through security barricades. The protesters were challenging 3 controversial electoral reform bills in the protest. The bills were being put before the House of Assembly and actually was voted in as law. And these protests were an attempt to stop these bills from being passed in Parliament. The demonstrators expressed dissatisfaction with aspects of the electoral reform bills, particularly the lack of provisions for cleansing the voters list and addressing campaign financing. Since the protests, police have arrested other persons, including a former member of parliament and a former opposition leader. Also, 2 other former legislators were arrested and a member of a group called the Electoral Reform Coalition. According to local media, a social media blogger was among those detained by the police. The arrested individuals face charges for unlawfully rioting and assembling together to the disturbance of the public in violation of the Riot Act of Dominica. Those found guilty could face up to 5 years in prison. This is an important issue because in the Caribbean, we have very questionable electoral laws. Just recently in Guyana, that issue emerged, and in other parts of the Caribbean, people are challenging some of these practices by the government relative to electoral laws and the conducting of elections. And the last piece I would read is out of Antigua. The Cabinet of Antigua and Barbuda has announced plans to implement paternity leave for male government employees, extending family support benefits that were previously only available to mothers. This new policy will require paternity leave provisions to be included in all labor agreements for male government workers according to the cabinet decision. Several organizations have already introduced paternity leave policies voluntarily. And this is an important piece because the sort of attack on men for being irresponsible fathers, when sometimes the state itself contributes to this sort of marginalization of men in the process of trying to exercise their right to fatherhood. So I think this is an important piece of information for the rest of the Caribbean to be familiar with. So those are the pieces for this week's Sunday Review.
Thanks, Brother Akko. You always pick pieces that no que where come from in the Caribbean, if you listen, you can relate. There's currently the Belize Peace Movement has a redistricting case before the high courts in Belize, and then there were three other Belizeans who took a similar interest, because the Belize Constitution say that each constituency should have about the same amount of voters in it. And Belize City have one big difference. Like maybe a constituency will have maybe 3,000. And then you have one down south who might have 10,000. And every political party play political football with this issue. And so this is something that when you bring that up about Dominica, it really, and that's why I value Brother Akka saying, yeah, we need to have this conversation on Sunday Review about what is happening in other Caribbean countries. The majority of people in the Caribbean population are people of African descent, because we enslaved ancestors and ancestors for the most part, then care that in place, we get free labor from, a lot of we still mentally enslaved. And so that's why it's so important that there's a safe space like a black-owned media house. Brother Doc Vincent Adams, you know, I get tired of here. I kind of used to hear I said this. A Mandela newspaper, 55 years. Creme Radio, 35 years. XTV, 21 years. The only black majority owned media house in the region. And as the chairperson of Yuba Educational Foundation, which are the consciousness arm of this media house, I use it as a space for connect with credible, aware people. We're not afraid to challenge the status quo, because sad to say, in most Caribbean countries, even though the people that look like we, all our skinfolk aren't our kinfolk, then generally not to make decisions in the best interest of the majority of the people in the countries. And so that's why we have Brother Doc Vincent Adams today. So tell me, and I really value taking time this morning. One brother, I don't tell you any credentials already. Petroleum and environmental engineer, but that's a professional career. I want to tell you the all where you come from, how you get far you get, brother, because I knew nobody no go spoon in your mouth. Tell me what you want, tell me about yourself.
Well, first of all, thanks for that introduction, Sister Yaya. I came from probably arguably the poorest or most disadvantaged community in Guyana, a place called Christianburg. And believe it or not, not even the politicians who were, most of the politicians who were running for office don't know anything about Christianburg, despite the fact that two out of the five lifetime opposition leaders, meaning the PNCR, the People's National Congress, that is in current opposition, came from those alleys of Christianburg, and that's what Christianburg was made up of. It's all alleyways, no paved roads and those type of things when we grew up. Robert Corbin and the current opposition leader, Aubrey Norton, as a matter of fact, the three of us grew up together in the alleys of Christianburg. And the current Prime Minister of Guyana, who is in the governing party, Mark Phillips, came from also from Christianburg. So the four of us, and we grew up because we were regarded as nobodies, as we didn't have anything of value except for the cemetery. The cemetery is located in Christianburg, but all the Linden, and by the way, Linden, it became Linden, and it was named after Linden Forbes Sampson Burnham when he was in office. But before that, there were three distinct townships, if you will. There was Christianburg and Wismar, which is on the west bank of the river, and then of course Mackenzie, which was the supposedly affluent side, and where the bauxite company was. So we all had to cross the river to go over there, but the folks from that side of the river never wanted to come over on our side because they had this myth and fear that we were a bunch of hooligans and that type of stuff, which is not true. So we always had this chip on our shoulder to prove something. So that really inspired me and motivated people like myself and maybe even Robert Corbin and Aubrey Norton and Mark Phillips to do well. And I happen to be the first cricketer, one of only two cricketers to date that has represented Guyana at cricket. And I was just telling the story before we came online here that I when I had to play across the other side of the river, even though I was representing both sides in our local cricket, I used to be booed by the folks on the other side of the river. So that's how things have changed a little bit now, where the relationship and the thinking is different. So I came out of there, and of course I was in the first set of first graduates. after playing cricket for Guyana, my whole ambition, of course, as a young cricketer in the West Indies is to play cricket for the West Indies. And after breaking into the Guyana team, I got into an automobile accident at the tender age of 19. And that is how I switched to academics. And, we know the rest of the story. I migrated after my first degree at the University of Guyana. I was in the first batch of engineers to graduate from the University of Guyana, came to the United States and worked my way up. I worked got myself up to the highest level of the United States government. We are the highest ranking officials. It's called a senior executive service official. When a new administration comes in, such as when Trump comes in or Biden, they appoint their political appointees, but then they come and go. But we are the ones who remain at the top of the government to run the day-to-day operations of the government. So we are the equivalent to the generals and the admirals in the military. So we're the ones who run the day-to-day operations of the government. And I held some very key positions in running some of the nuclear weapons complexes, and science, developing science in the USA, working for the Department of Energy for over 30 years. So I was responsible for developing science. The Department of Energy, by the way, is not only responsible for energy, it's also responsible for building and maintaining the nuclear weapons complex of the nation. It's responsible for the science of the nation because we own all of the national laboratories. And of course, I've been keeping in contact with the Caribbean. I was head during all this period of time. I was head of these hometown associations. One was called the Linden Fund USA. I was chairman for over 13 years, but I still maintain it. Then I went back again after retiring to head the Environmental Protection Agency and to advise the government on the petroleum on the management of the petroleum. But then the government changed, and then I came back to the United States. But I'm still involved in advising and helping out and doing whatever I can for Guyana. So I've remained connected. I've remained connected, and that's why I'm on illustrious programs such as such as Belize XTV. By the way, I visited Belize once to play cricket, as a matter of fact, and I fell in love with that place so badly. And I even considered um, migrating to Belize after retirement, but then I got involved with the Guyana politics, and so that so you can blame Guyana and its politics for not having me in the wonderful country of Belize.
Oh, that's good. Well, you could come anytime.
It
What you
reminds
what?
me, what's amazing? It reminded me, I could not believe it. It reminded me, the capital city reminded me of Georgetown with the seawall, and most of your streets are named. Well, I can't say after because I don't know who had the names first, but they had the same names that of the streets in Georgetown.
Probably after some European colonizer. We known for that and so we got political independence. Yeah, brother Ako. Like
Yeah.
British,
um
but
like
British,
Georgetown.
yeah,
We have a
British,
Georgeville, but
yeah.
it's named after the first premier and prime minister of Belize, George Price.
I
The
think you
what
got a
year?
water street too. Don't you have a water street? Do you have some streets? I can't remember what the streets were that was had the common name.
I'm sure of it. We have
Yeah.
canals. We have canals. So I don't know if those would be the streets that you would be referring to. Like we have East Colic Canal, West Colic Canal. What year did you come here to play cricket?
Oh gosh, now you're gonna embarrass me. It had to have been it's 2000. I came with an Atlanta team, um, with Clayton Lambert and some others. What year was that? 2008, around that time, or
Oh, that
2010? Yeah, yeah. It's around that time, around 2008, I think.
okay. Good, good, good. Now, are there other people in your industry who are from the Caribbean that you
Well,
know of?
you mean in the U.S. government?
N- Uh, if there's anybody from the Caribbean who may be in oil and gas at the level
Oh
where you
no,
are.
no, 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 none. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things that I would normally do. to try to look around to see if there are people from the Caribbean and that work for government. I would find, I remember there was a Jamaican lady, but she was with the Department of Justice. Normally when we have these conferences and seminar and training, you would run into those type of folks. She was from Jamaica in the Department of Justice. Then there was another lady in Guyanese from the Department of Transportation. Um, but then besides those two, those were. But I never really ran into people who at that level anyway. At that level, you would always find other folks, but not at that level. No.
Okay, I want to ask Brother Doc Vincent Adams anything before we go to break?
Well, yes, he said that he left Guyana and he omitted under controversial circumstances because he insisted on a certain protocol, if I understand it clearly, related to something Exxon did, and as the director of the EPA, and because of that, I understand the government did not particularly care for his presence. But he can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I will.
I
I
think
would like to definitely.
yeah.
We can't. All
Well, you
right.
can go ahead.
I want to get into that, but we have maybe about 4 more minutes in this segment. The other two
Yeah.
segments, I definitely want to go into more details about oil and gas in Guyana, but in a language where people could relate to, because the
Sure.
technically trained people have levels of conversation or concept where we can't relate to. Because the mindset of a lot of people since they find oil, the Guyana, is that, well, no, the people are now impoverished no more because I got money today. One time, if you listen to Red Thread, a women organization who everyday grassroots women, both of African and Indian heritage, have make sure they learn the science, very grassroots, the advocacy for say this that is something we support in the best interest of Guyanese people. And there are one of the few groups where I know of the Guyana were strong for years. In this particular case, pushing back on gas and oil. So I really curious. Before we go to a break, I think this is important for you to mention, brother Doc Vincent Adams, is that there are two major ethnic groups in Guyana. And most Belizeans won't be aware of how real the tension has been historically and still is when it comes to African descendants and Indian people in Guyana and political parties. So tell me about that to set the stage, how we have to keep that in mind as he continues to talk about oil and gas. And the focus today is that not if one oil spill will happen, that when one oil spill happen, how you impact the Caribbean, meaning the people, the coastlines, animals, water, everything. So tell about the ethnic conflict in Guyana, Brother Doc.
Who else could be more placed than that position than I am, with my father being African and my mother being Indian? So I'm I'm the true-blooded Guyanese, or what we call in Douglas. And
Yeah,
you're
Douglas.
absolutely right. Going back to, and to put things into context, and it's really not in the DNA. This racial conflict was not built. You remember that the two founders or fathers of Guyana were Dr. Chetty Jagan and Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham, and they were the two of them fought the British for independence. They formed a single party. There was a single movement. They formed a single party, the People's Progressive Party, and then they broke away in 1954 because they separated for various reasons. That's how you get the black. That was when the split came, and there was all sort of stories behind that. And so when it split, that's when the racial tension started. I grew up like in Linden. Linden is predominantly, I mean, you couldn't find an Indian. I mean, currently there are very few Indian faces, but it's always predominantly the stronghold of the PNC, which is the Black Party. So is Buxton, right? Also, certain areas are predominantly black, certain areas predominantly Indian, and we went through what really um, put everything, and we have made the country really set it back in terms of racial harmony was in 1963 when the PPP imposed a budget of it, well, it declared it was a communist. And then, of course, the Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham Party was supported by the United States. And so that's where the racial tension started. And then there was the budget, the famous, what they call a budget under the PPP. That, and then you had some racial incidents, like there was a serious incident where a boat was bombed. A boat coming to Linden was bombed, the Son Chapman, killing, I think, about 40 something people from Linden. It started a race riot. And we could never recover from that 1963 race riot, where in the Indian communities, the blacks, were killed and harmed. In the black communities, the Indians were killed and harmed. And we have never recovered from that 1960s, the 63, 64 race riots. And it happened a few times after that. And we've never recovered. So the parties, the two political parties, are built strictly along racial lines. You can bet your bottom dollar, regardless of what you hear for the 4 or 5 years you're in office, when the people go to the polls, that's what's going to happen. Now, there was a party, the Alliance for Change Party, that came into being in 2005, I think, or 2006. And interestingly enough, that was the attempt to bring that racial divide back, to bring racial harmony back together, where a leader of the PNC party, a guy by the name of Raphael Trotman, joined with another leader of the PPP party by the name of Kemraj Ramjatan. They came together and formed the Alliance for Change party. And in their first, I think it was historical, in their first year, in their first election, I think they won like 7 seats, which was unheard of. But what happened in 2015, the AFC joined a coalition with the PNCR that put that opposition coalition into office. So now, so because of joining back, there's a perception that this AFC is no longer that middle of the road party. They're now joined, they're part of the PNCR party. And there's discussions right now in terms of going into another coalition coming up in this election. But that's what the racial divide, and it has never, and even up to today, it's exactly the same, regardless of what happens. I normally say that if you bring Satan to run for the PPP, the Indians are going to vote for him. And if you bring Satan to run for the PNC, same thing, the blacks are going to vote for him. So I don't know. And I've always said you probably need a Douglas, and in a serious way. I've told because it comes down to trust. It doesn't have anything to do with what people believe is best for the country anymore. The Indians do not trust any black person, and the blacks do not trust any Indian person. And I've told in serious conversations, told my political friends that maybe there should be some mixed race person with credibility and neutrality, and to bring everything back together. So that it's a serious issue that we have in Guyana. So that's what it is. I hope I've
Yeah, that's helpful. What's the population of Guyana, and what's the breakdown with African descendants and Indian people?
Well, what the population right now is that's the other thing. The government is all kinds of issues going on with information and transparency. But there was a census done, but the government is not. I guess we're getting into election. Everybody playing politics. They're not releasing the census, but it's normally around 800,000. So of that, 40% are Indians, 30% are blacks, and interestingly enough, 20% are mixed race. So and then of course you got a 10%. You got close to then the other sector is of course the Amerindians, the native Indians, that makes up the remaining 10% or so. But a lot of it used to be the disparity used to be the difference used to be much bigger in the past because Indians definitely used to dominate. But then there was lots of migration away from Guyana because of the economy and everything else. In the past 2 decades, and so that's why the numbers have, well, not really tightened, so to speak, because but you still have that 10% difference between the Indian, meaning East Indians from India, and the blacks, originating from Africa. You've got that 10% difference. But I think the biggest development was the mixed race population, and that's why I still have hope for Guyana, because I remember in my days when I growing up as a mixed race person, and my father and my mother would, it used to be a strange thing to see an Indian with a black. It's not the case anymore, and so I think for maybe a couple of generations to come, hopefully all this racial tension will disappear. Or if you get a leader who's really committed, and I've got to say, with, of it's a fact that right now this current government is not doing anything to ease that tension. As a matter of fact, they're exacerbating it by, with the political rhetoric.
It was important that you set that tone because the laws that are created, amended, enforced are not in Guyana as it relates to oil and gas is very much determined by those in political office. So I take a first break. On stay tuned. We have Brother Doc Vincent Adams from Guyana and our co-host, Brother Akom Mutota, who did a Guyana guy gone for Brother Yusuf big time. What can you imagine?
I'm in Guyana, yes.
100 years. 100 years. Can you and the man
Yeah.
bring it sharp, brother. I could say, give thanks and praises. Well, a man gone through well, he see. Give thanks and praises for his life and for the community
My
that came out to
in,
support him.
in my statement last night, I said he's a time traveler.
I like that.
Yeah, he is definitely an
Traveling through
icon.
time.
He is
Yeah,
the guy is just, he definitely one of our celebrated West Indians. I don't even like to limit him to just Guyanese.
and
He
Caribbean, the entire
he's
Caribbean.
Caribbean. He
Are
set.
we off air? We off?
We're going off right now, though. Right. We'll take a first break. I'm going to break. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
At Atlantic Bank, area. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Ufa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago.
Bird's Eye, starting at 4 p.m. Don't miss it.
It's a date. Roads. At 7
have the skill set. So in recognizing that one minister or ministers not have the skill set, who would then have the skill set and credible and fearless to challenge status quo for advise ministers prior to them make that kind of legal binding agreement where the people won't have to live with. So give a story, brother. Keep it along, sure. Tell me what's going on.
Okay, so what has been happening here? This whole contract has been significantly politicized. So here are the facts that the people in the Caribbean need. So now I say the people in the Caribbean because, and I beg the folks in the Caribbean pay attention. This is not a Guyana problem. If there is a spill, which is the biggest consequence that can happen, it's not Guyana. As a matter of fact, Guyana might even escape a lot of the spill, while the Caribbean would really suffer because this whole oil, all this oil operation is the Stabroek Block with Exxon. It's 100 miles offshore Guyana, so it's not like right on Guyana. So if anything happens, where that wind takes it, and it takes it right through the Caribbean. But anyway, so the first contract was signed in 1999 by Janet Jagan, who was the president of Guyana. Janet Jagan belonged to the PPP government, which is the current government at the time. Fast forward, 2015, the oil was discovered. Up to 1999, there were exploration. Exploration was going on since the 1960s or something. So, 2015, oil was discovered. The government, the opposition, the current opposition party, which is the PNCR, won the election, or the coalition with the AFC won the election in 2015. So after the discovery now, a new contract was signed. It so happened, which was against my advice and others, it so happened that the government, the opposition, the current opposition government, who was the government in 2015, signed the same exact contract that was signed in 1999, except for one change, which was not a significant change, and that change was doubling the royalty from 1% to 2%. So here's the bottom line. The bottom line is that Guyana only gets about 14.5% of the take, regardless of the propaganda that you hear, which is absolute rubbish and a blatant lie. Exxon has even gone so far as to put up billboards to say that Guyana is getting 52% of the take. It's a blatant lie. Guyana gets 14.5%. Exxon and its two partners, Hess and Sunup, they get the remainder 85.5%. That's a fact. Exxon put up billboards saying that Guyana is getting 52%, which is a blatant lie.
Let me ask you this. At any point, was there an awareness campaign for the Guyanese people to understand what it meant for them because oil was discovered? Was there any campaign to inform the people about the process?
No. And what had happened, because people, for want of a better word, of course, All comes to Guyana. People are, everybody giddy. Exxon, I'm telling you because, and I hate to say it, but I've said it publicly before. They went against my advice because my advice was to throw away that contract, to throw it away. That contract has no relevance to the situation in Ghana. They went with what is called this production sharing agreement. It's the most complex contract type you can think of, where first of all we have no capacity to manage such a contract because Exxon makes all the decisions. We are not involved in the decisions. Um, even when we do audits, they're not even allowing us to see all of the data and everything else. So for us to monitor that contract, we have no expertise. So my simplistic contract, which was what was used in the past, is a contract type called concession contract. And all you need to do is to say, okay, Exxon, for every 100 barrels of oil you produce, we will take 40 or 50 or whatever number you want. And so I don't have to go and audit you. All I need is to make sure that meter is running correctly, and I have even a high school graduate who can count barrels. That's all I need. I don't need no sophisticated people to monitor. The oil comes out to the ground, it goes through that meter. As long as I can make sure that meter is running correctly, and we got a lot of technicians who understands, and even if you got to take them to training, that's all I need to know. The meter is running correctly, so every 100 barrels come out, you put aside 40 for me or 50, whatever number you decide. I take this. I ain't got to be monitoring, and then you are keeping the books. I can't even see the books. And you're telling me this is the amount that they're telling you how much you're going to be getting. But here's the other part of it that a lot of people don't know. This is going to blow your mind, folks. Exxon, besides only giving us 12.5%, well, 12.5 plus to 14.5%, they do not pay any taxes to the nation compared to the small businesses and everybody else in the nation. But here on top of this is what's going to blow your mind. The government of Guyana pay their taxes, meaning that one arm of the government comes up with Exxon is supposed to pay whatever the other companies in Guyana are paying. I think it is anywhere between 25 or 30% taxes on their profit. So whatever that bill is for all of the billions of dollars that Exxon is making, so here comes a tax bill. One arm of the government sends the tax bill to another arm of the government. That arm of the government they don't pay it in reality. What they do, they write a receipt. They write a receipt and give it. Listen to this here now. They write a receipt to Exxon for that tax bill that Exxon was supposed to pay that Exxon does not pay. Exxon takes that receipt to the United States IRS and gets a credit. They get a credit for the taxes that they did not pay in Guyana. That's the kind of stuff that we're allowing. And I guess there's some legal shenanigans but a lot of people have written the IRS about it. But so that's what it is. Imagine that they do not pay the taxes. We give them a receipt for taxes they did not pay, and then they take that receipt and gets a credit for it from the United States government when they file their tax returns.
Brother
That's the
Akko,
thing we're allowing.
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? You're about longer than me. When you hear the failure of governments, here's an opportunity for the quality of life for Guyanese people to really improve. And they're betrayed by political leadership. And this is not unique to Guyana. This is systemic in the Caribbean. What are your 2 cents for that, Brother Akko?
Well, my perspective on this, as you know, I have an issue with people saying in the Caribbean we are post-colonial. And I keep saying that we have to use the term neo-colonial. Because what Dr. Vince just explained there is the classic colonial model of economics. Classic colonial. You go back to the 1950s, right, in Africa, right? And in parts of the Caribbean and Asia, and you will see the same thing where the multinationals come in, whether it was the rubber, right, in Indonesia, or it was cocoa in Ghana and the Ivory Coast, and basically determined how the economy should function and determine how the state should operate. And so our leadership, right, is in collaboration with these multinationals, right, in order to fleece the countries and to transfer the wealth of these nations to the metropole through the multinational corporations. So we have to really understand this as a neo-colonial model. This is what I'm saying. This term post-colonial is an aberration because this is a colonial relationship supposedly by an independent country. And as you rightly indicated, this is not the first step. There was a scheme when they followed the Arthur Lewis model in the Caribbean, industrialization by invitation. And I remember when it was in Trinidad, they would give these people 10 and 20-year tax holidays to make clothes and shoes and so on. And they would come to Trinidad and get 20 years tax holiday. And after 20 years, they were supposed to pay taxes and develop the industry. And what they would do, after the 20-year lease, they would leave and go to Barbados and get another 20 years. And they did that throughout the Caribbean until it was no longer to their benefit. So what he explained there to me is a classic neo-colonial model of economics, in which the people of the country and the state is in complicity with multinationals to fleece and exploit the resources of the country. And that's what that is showing you, that we have not changed despite the fact that people are saying we are post-colonial and somehow we have this independence and fact. We are in a neo-colonial state, which Kwame Nkrumah described as the last stage of imperialism in his book.
Thanks, Brother Akka. Brother Vincent,
Yeah.
I have an interest particularly about, not if there's going to be an oil spill, when there's an oil spill in Guyana, how you impact the Caribbean, but who will pay for it? And then I will come back to that question, Brother Akka, ask you before we come to this segment. But when there's an oil spill, and I bring this up because the contract that wasn't in the interest of Guyanese, who want to pay for the cleanup, for the restoration? Who want to pay for the? I mean, really, the environment and the people want to pay for it. That we want to pay the most for it. We, the people in the Caribbean, and the environment, that the biggest cost to we. But financially, who want to pay for that?
Well, and in addressing that, let me also address what Brother Akko mentioned here, and he's absolutely correct. But you know what? We are still living this colonial mentality in this area, that we somehow fearful of our colonial masters when they come in, nobody touch Exxon. But if you stand up and show strength and show that you're capable and you're standing up for your right, they know what your right is. Look, and here's a good example. When I arrived in Guyana to take over the EPA, and I saw what was happening in terms of even because the EPA has to issue the permit. They can't operate without the EPA issues permit. So they brought the permit to me, and when I looked at it, I said, wait a minute. If we get a spill, who will pay for a spill? Because there's nothing in there to cover it, and I know that it's inevitable. So, well, because here's another fundamental point that people need to understand. People talks about Exxon. Every time you hear, oh, it's Exxon this and Exxon. Exxon name is not on any document. Exxon has no liability, zilch liability. What Exxon did, which is what these big mega companies do, they form a limited liability company called Exxon Mobil Guyana Limited. Guess where that company is incorporated? In the Bahamas, where they pay taxes in the Bahamas, by the way, for the oil that they're producing in Guyana. So what that did, they formed this ENGL company, a limited liability company, which by definition, what that does is to insulate Big Father company Exxon from any liability. So if you get a spill, there are no assets to cover it. So that was the first thing I know. I said, well, okay, what's gonna happen? You know what? You know what the guy told me? Well, my first rule was, because I know what's going on. I called in the country president, the XI. I said, listen, you will not be allowed to do anything else less than what you have to abide with in the United States. And you know that I know, well, of course they know where I came from, because when we tell them to jump, because those are the levels that we used to deal with the presidents and them. And we used to write the contracts, and we used to determine how much salary they get in their contract. So I said, um, I will not accept anything less than what you have to buy within the United States. The guy said, yes, I understand, but we were only doing it because, listen to this, the guy said, because the government of Guyana was allowing it. So the first thing I asked, I said, well, okay, this is a big deal now with this thing. Well, he said, the contract says that we could be self-insured. Well, guess what self-insured means? That EMGL will be there in kind of responsible if there is a spill. I said, but show me your assets that EMGL has. They did not have a single diamond asset because they expect to build their assets from producing oil. They hadn't produced a barrel of oil yet. I said, wait, are you kidding me? I said, where is your assets? They ain't got none. He said, well, he was going to bring in that time it was Tillerson who worked for the Trump 1 administration at the time. Was they're going to bring in Tillerson to talk to Granger. And I said, well, you could bring in God as long as I'm here. You will not produce a barrel of oil until I get a guarantee to cover an oil spill, whatever it costs. The hem and hard, within 2 days, they call me back and tell me, okay, let's work out the language. We put in there in the permit, even though which was even going against the contract, this contract that is so sanctified, that now this current government is defending everything in that contract by saying, well, there's sanctity of contract. I said, I don't care what's in the contract. I care about protecting the people of Guyana. Do you know they agreed? We put into the permit. We put into that permit that what they said, well, we're going to go get insurance. Well, no insurance company is going to cover you for an unlimited quantity. So they claimed that they had $600 million. I said, I don't care even if you got a penny. Exxon, not EMG, Exxon has to give us a guarantee that they will cover all costs over and above what that insurance does not cover for whatever it costs. Liabilities, the individual, if Trinidad or Belize, they got to cover everything. They agreed to that. We put the language into the permit. Exxon agreed to it. Exxon had to sign it, even though the contract said one thing. They were forced to do it, but that's why the point I'm making is that these people know what is right, but you've got to force them into it. And when they see strength, do you know what's also in that contract that I changed? Imagine the government of Guyana had to give them 7 days notice to visit any one of those drill ships. I said, you got to be out of your mind. So guess what I put in there? That we shall have unfettered access up to and including unannounced visits. They had to sign up to that. So going against the contract again, but going back to the oil spill, which ties into the same, what I call a parent company guarantee, which meant it was an unlimited quantity. I didn't care how much it cost. You have, not EMGL, Exxon, the deep pocket guys who are making the billions, they're the one, we put it into the permit so it became law. Okay, as soon as the government that I was in, as soon as I left off, as a matter of fact, it was me, because as soon as they got into office, they sent me on leave. And the next month, they signed, they got rid of that, they decided to renege on that, even though it's in law. So two citizens filed a lawsuit. The two citizens filed a lawsuit, and it was overwhelming. And you should have seen if you see this decision, you would think that the government would be so embarrassed. This government said that the judge said all they're doing, this government is undermining, they're joining with Exxon to going against the people of Guyana. I mean, it was bad, it was nasty. They said that they were subservient to Exxon. You should see the language. But anyway, would you believe, if you think that would have kept them quiet, and that was a way out for the government to find the excuse to at least, well, okay, save face and say, well, the judge. Do you believe that the government joined with Exxon to appeal that case? The government joined with Exxon to appeal the case and was so brazen that they went and made a deal with Exxon that they're paying company guarantee. So they added another language now to say that this guarantee should be capped at $2 billion. Well, guess what, Sister Yaya and Brother Akko? That you remember that Macondo spill in the Gulf? You know how much it cost? 145 billion US dollars. And they want to cap it at $2 billion. So that's been my biggest struggle. I've been writing, I've been talking myself and others. So to answer your question, we have no cover. Oh, here's the other thing. So in the appeal now, they went before the judge to, in the appeal case, it didn't to see whether they had standing to appeal, whether the government had standing to appeal. Then the judge said, while we await the appeal, we should they've got to show this $2 billion of money that is there while the appeal. At least we've got $2 billion. I call it bond money, right? When the folks in Parliament, the PPP guys in Parliament said, oh, when the opposition called for showing us the certificate for the $2 billion, they can't show it. He said, oh, go to the EPA. The EPA is ready going to give it. When they went to the EPA said, no, you got to go to court to get it. So up to now, even with the $2 billion bond money, nobody can see it. They're even defying the court orders. So we even got lawlessness in the country, and we're not following the rule of law. So right now, getting back to the question, be it, and Trinidad will be the first island to be wiped out, clean, from the northern on the east because of the flow of the current. From north to south Trinidad on the eastern side of Trinidad, that would be washed away. And then it goes all the way Jamaica and every place else, with time. That's what we're risking. So here's the other thing that they reversed that I had put in place. In the Macondo spill, if you recall, the spill occurred for like 89 days. It was flowing in the Gulf. They couldn't stop it. The well was just...
That's in New Orleans, right? That's in New Orleans.
Well, no, it's in the offshore, way off. Yeah. So it was flowing like crazy. The well was just flowing, and they couldn't stop it. So what was invented after that was to put a lid. It's called a capping stack. To put a lid on top of the well to stop it from flowing. So we demanded, myself and at the time Dr. Bino, who was in charge of the Department of Energy, demanded that they get the capping stack, which they went out and got. But you had to get that capping stack to the site as soon as possible. That was the criteria. So we told Exxon to come up with a plan to get it there as soon as possible. They came up and tell us they're going to get it there in 20 days. I said, yo, you got to be mad. We need it there ASAP. They came up. They said 5 days. We said, no, we wanted 3 days, as soon as possible. That's what we put into the new permit, the condition that it shall get there within 3 days. Do you know what this current government did when they got into office? They tripled that time, got with Exxon to triple that time to 9 days. So here you're going to have an extra 6 days if anything should happen. And the oil will be just gushing all of the Caribbean. Here's another irresponsible thing that the government is doing. That I had put in place. The environmental impact assessment is what we call the Bible in this industry, or in any industry. And what the EIA does is to identify hazards and to come up with mitigative action. And EIA normally takes like years to develop because it takes input from all the exports all over the world, and even in the community, it has to go out for public comments and that type of thing. The EIA says that you cannot, the safe operating limit, for example, let's take one of the projects. The safe operating limit in Liza 1 is 120,000 barrels per day. As a matter of fact, you don't even get close to that. So what you do, you set an internal limit of about 20% less, so you wouldn't get close to the 120. We set an internal limit of 100,000 barrels per day that Exxon agreed to. It's in the EIA, which is the Bible. When I was there, they couldn't exceed 100,000 barrels per day. In the United States, if you exceed it, you shut down. Do you know what they're operating at now? 163,000 barrels per day. 63% above the safe operating limit, and they're doing it for all of the projects. And this government is allowing them to do that. But it's sheer lawlessness that broke out since I left the EPA and since the government got out of it, because I had full more than 100% support from President Granger, who was my minister basically. He never got in the way of me doing the right thing. But this government has reversed everything, even dumping. We're talking about the spill. The spill is not all. They are now allowed to dump produced water when the oil comes up. It brings up a lot of toxic water, high salt water. The water is 3 times as hot as in the ocean. It has toxic materials such as mercury, lead, name it, and and radioactivity. We require that water be reinjected back into the reservoir from whence it comes, and which is what the international standards call for. But it's cheaper for them to dump that water in the ocean. So every day they're dumping thousands of barrels of water into the ocean that is hot. It has oil in it, by the way. For every million barrels of water that you dump, you're also dumping 40 barrels of oil, because you cannot remove all of the oil from the water. So over the period of time, just they're allowed by law to dump hundreds of thousands of barrels of pure oil into the ocean. And on top of that, it's hot, it's radioactive, it has a whole lot of toxic material. So those are the kind of, that doesn't affect Guyana alone, by the way, because we're also seeing overfishing numbers have dropped significantly, but it also affects the entire Caribbean with migration of species, and even the fish species that we eat. They would absorb things like mercury and benzene and all this kinds of toxic stuff into their bodies, and then we've got to eat it. So
Take
those,
take a break, brother. Take a break, cause my goodness, you unleash one wealth of knowledge. With a past break time, brother. Woo! Hey, I need a break. The break time, I need a break, because that's a lot to process. Big respect to your courage, the truthfulness that you've been telling, and remember, only the people want to save the people. So the more knowledge we have as everyday people, the
absolutely.
more we will feel confident to hold people in power accountable. We're going to make the best decisions for we. But we have to have the knowledge and make sure the knowledge correct, and be open for say, you know, things change, new information come out. But we're going to take a break. Stay tuned.
All right.
Welcome to Atlantic Online.
Oh, ask brother Vincent, wait, me ask you in the first segment. I want you to answer that question.
So my information that, and I would like you to clarify, my information is that he became a thorn in the side of the government, and that the government wanted him out, and they fabricated a way to get him out. So that is my question, because he was making life uncomfortable for Exxon and for the government. And I understand that the government gerrymandered, if you want to call it that, his departure. So that's my question to him. Is that true or is that false?
No, well, you got it partly correctly. I worked when I was there for the previous government, the PNCR government, the coalition government, and I had the fullest support. I couldn't get anything. I mean, I was out there taking on the big companies. It wasn't Exxon alone. We had mining companies from Australia, Canada, and I was shutting them down when they weren't complying. And when you shut them down, they understand it. They quickly comply. And I had the full support of Mr. Granger, who was my minister, if you will, even as the president. So I had the full support. What happened was when they changed government, I remember that Mr. Jagdeo, he called when I was. It wasn't Jagdeo. Even the Jagdeo, when they changed government, and you remember that transition 5 months when
Yeah.
after the elections, Jagdeo became my minister in the new government. While for the few months that I was there, and he had full confidence in me, and he always said that, hey, you know what, I want you to to come back, please. He called me, as a matter of fact, he called me and told me, listen, I want you to come back, but I don't want you to EP. I want you to run the oil industry, because you're the kind of person that I need. I said, well, I said, be careful for what you ask for, because I'm gonna do my thing, what I believe is right for the country. He said, no, you're a professional. I know that you're gonna be able, as long as you stay professional, I am good. He gave me his personal number, and he told me to, as soon as I get back from my leave, to come call him, and we're gonna take care of it. The president, they made public statements, because they were asked, when is Dr. Adams coming back from leave? The president, Mr. Ali, and Jagdeo said that I'm coming back, except that I'm coming back in the oil industry. And I was called from the president's office one afternoon while I was on leave, because they had just set up the gas to shore project, and the president told the guy who set up the gas to shore project not to do anything without my blessing. They called me, and then when I returned the call, when the secretary tried to put through the call to the president, said, oh, they just dragged him out. Somebody just dragged him out of the office, but as soon as he gets in, he's going to call you back, because he really wanted to talk to you. My understanding was that Exxon told them not under their dead body would I come back and work, should I come back and work for the government. And after that conversation with them, I never heard anything back from the PPP government. So my point is, Exxon, even though the PPP government, I know that for a fact, and Jagdeo cannot deny that, Dr. Ali cannot deny that. They said that they wanted me back. But Exxon said no. They said that, oh, I was arrogant. Well, I take it as a badge of honor if Exxon says that I'm arrogant. Because I'm glad that they recognize that I'm arrogant towards them, because that's the only thing that it takes to handle them. So that's what it was. It wasn't that the PPP government didn't want to retain me, but Exxon said no. Exxon vetoed that government. But I want to distinguish.
In other words, God said no.
Absolutely. But I want to distinguish between the two governments, because with the coalition, I had the full support, but with the PPP government, absolutely not.
So then, it said it not like we're now an independent state. If ExxonMobil could tell for no government who for hire and who for no hire, and then take the marching order.
But that's and it's and to even the exhibit number one to that in that respect is you remember what I said here before this current government got into office, they were berating the opposition and berating Exxon, saying that they're ripping us off, and when they got into government, the whole tune changed. So Exxon has taken complete control of this government. Why would a government go and join with Exxon against its own people to say, you know what? We don't need any, the people who voted me in office don't need any protection. The Caribbean doesn't need any protection from an oil spill because Exxon says so. And Exxon wants to make money. And we'll stick with our paltry 14.5%. Which government would do that after boasting, well, when I get into office, I will make all of that change. I will renegotiate. Exxon is not going to get their way that they're getting with you guys. So it's clear what these guys, that Exxon is controlling this government without question.
We have a few minutes left. What can the people do? Because only the people want to save the people. What can the people do in our best interest since the government is failing? I mean,
Good.
failing in Guyanese, but then we want to get impacted in the Caribbean. I mean, you hear what I said, brother? I got you. They have to be able to wipe out.
Oh, I am not just sure. He said in a previous interview I heard with him, he said it will impact as far as Jamaica.
Yes. Yeah,
but here, as far as Jamaica.
But here's what's important here that the Caribbean people needs to understand. There's an organization and there's some diaspora groups with some high-powered people. Like this one is called Oil and Gas Network. It's a group of in the diaspora, Guyanese diaspora, highly qualified folks, professors at universities, etc. I'm part of it. We wrote a letter to Mayor Motley. We wrote a letter to the ex-Trinidad Prime Minister
Rowley.
We wrote a letter to Mayor Motley and Rowley explaining all of this and tell them to bring it to. We wrote a letter to CARICOM. And until now, we've not even given the courtesy of a response from them. Everything I'm telling you guys here in terms of the impact to the Caribbean, because this is not a Guyanese thing, they have never even granted the courtesy to this organization to give us a response. Look, you remember this thing, and if you think that this is just theoretical stuff that we're talking about here, did you remember that little spill, and it's a very little spill in Trinidad and Tobago?
I remember.
That was about 30,000 barrels. What we're talking about here is tens of millions of barrels. You see the chaos it caused in Trinidad? And listen to this. And that was a one-time thing. That boat was passing through one time. Every single day, we will have a ship passing through the Caribbean, besides having a well blowout or anything happening on board. Every single day, we will have a ship passing through the Caribbean with 1 million barrels per day, every day. So you calculate the risk of something happening. That one time, we had a spill with that 30,000, that's 30,000, right? Which is more than 30 times less than one of these ships. 1 million barrels a day will be passing through the Caribbean almost every single day. Well, so there's a high risk that something can happen. But if something happens, nothing, there's nothing to cover it right now. Nothing, because they cannot even show the $2 billion, which is bond money that they've gotten. So Exxon is just having this week. So the one thing, to get back to your answer, Sister YaYa, which is what, even when I was at the EPA, I was advocating. Remember I told you about this environmental impact assessment? That's the Bible, that's the plan to move forward with these projects, that where you have input from everybody, the impacted community. That's the key. I have advocated, and I was going to be moving towards getting the Caribbean involved in putting together that EIA, because it's going to impact them. If something happens, they have got to respond also. So it's not only Guyana. As a matter of fact, Guyana is 100 miles away. So that's one of the things, but we've got to get, this whole thing about Mayor Motley and the rest of them, CARICOM, them not even responding to those type of issues. I think it's irresponsible, and that's where the pressure ought to come to the leaders of the Caribbean country.
Guyana has also signed the Escazú Agreement.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's an instrument that I really think should be used in this instance. But what I would want you to do, Brother Doc, is to send me that letter that was sent to CARICOM. And I
Absolutely.
think individual organizations need to send that letter to their head of state
Yes.
and
Great.
bring pressure on their head of state.
Great.
So, since they don't want to answer collectively, I mean, this is nothing new. There's a failure in leadership, but it's up to we, the people, once we understand the issue. I think that's one of the ways for the people to bring pressure on your individual political leadership.
Yeah.
That the need for a response to the letter at the CARICOM level. Brother Akka, what their final thoughts? What their 2 cents?
Sister Yaya, I what he's talking about, I am very familiar. Where the community I'm from, which is Guayari, Miaro, Southeast Trinidad, that toxic leftover he spoke about, I remember the term, that the water that they throw into the sea. We have had that in Trinidad, and I'll tell you what has happened. The area where I live, we could have, there was a wetland mangrove, and the biggest oysters and crabs and so on, you could get it in that area. That mangrove is totally devastated. Okay, areas that were filled with we as a little boy, I could have gone into the breakers with water into my knee or the rest of my knee. As a boy, I'm telling you, with a plaited, we used to make a plaited seine out of 2 coconut branches. Put it in this and we will catch fish. You can no longer do that. Okay? We had a mussel called chip chip that the people used to, it has been there for thousands of years. In fact, the indigenous people used it. And there have been anthropological discoveries with chip chip shell and so on. You no longer see that mussel anymore. We have a conch, right? We call it caracol. You used to walk up at the beach just a mile and you'd pick up buckets of it. All those things, because of the oil spills, are gone. So people's sources of food, the sources of food from the ocean that I grew up with in my little village called Guayagüeari, those things no longer exist. You see them occasionally now. You see? So and it has been traced to that toxic thing he said that they release into the water. Fishermen will tell you they do fish from the shore with their rods. Will tell you they will cast their one fisherman told me cast his rod and it got the hook got stuck. So he just walked out in the water and when he put his hand under, it was oil. Because what they did, they used these chemical products for oil spills, minor oil spills. And rather than it dissolve the spill, it goes under the ocean and affects the ocean. And that is what has happened. And these governments know this, we're telling them, right? There are pipes that are broken when they unhinge the tankers, spills get into the water, get into the reefs. So Trinidad has enough experience, and not only that, there are other related issues in our community. In the last 15 years, we have seen an unprecedented amount of cancer, especially among women in the community and young women. Okay? And no one is doing any kind of research as to whether that is an impact from the environment caused by the oil industry. So this is a very serious issue that need to be ventilated and discussed throughout the Caribbean, you know?
Thanks, Brother Akka. You know, brother, I mean, there's a lot I don't know, but I know I have not heard, like in Belize, you know, you hear about our fish stock is decreasing. But I don't remember ever hearing this particular issue where you just say, but when oil come up, water come up too, and how that impact the entire Caribbean. I don't remember hearing that when you talk about environmental concerns. And I say, Brother Akka, say clearly where the food stock from the ocean or the sea, then and the boat no more. There's a generation will never want to eat that, never know about anything.
No, exactly.
So, Brother Vincent, how come, maybe I just not hear, maybe you hear, when you hear about environmental impact, climate crisis, that's not something what I hear, but that's something what people talk about and I just miss it. You hear about other mitigating situation, but I don't hear about that.
Yeah, because yeah, a lot of the those that type of information. You mentioned the Escazor agreement that everybody signed, but right over the last couple of weeks in Guyana itself, there have been protests. You cannot get any information from the government. They're using that Escazor agreement as a justification as to why we should get, but the government doesn't care. It's just sheer lawlessness. Now, what Brother Akko talked about there. Do you know what Exxon admitted to up to yesterday or the day before? Because they're going through the environmental impact assessment process to come up with this document. So you have to have public meetings. Do you know what they agreed, what they admitted to last week? They admitted that yes, they're producing above the safe operating limit. But everything that comes down to greed. Do you know what they also admitted to? Listen to this, going back to the fish, that these operations are killing, listen to this, killing millions of fish eggs. That's in the EIA. They're killing millions of fish eggs. Well, if you don't have the eggs, you can't get the fish. And the other thing, by the way, which is again why the sensitivity ought to increase as far as the CARICOM leaders are concerned. The environmental pollution does not see geographic boundaries. Okay, it goes wherever the current takes it in the ocean and wherever the wind takes it in the air. So I did not even talk about the air, because you don't see what's going on. They are flaring, meaning when that oil comes up, every barrel of oil comes up with a large volume of gas, toxic gas that has over 200 chemical contaminants that could affect your respiratory system.
Respiration, yeah, yeah.
But not only your respiratory system, it causes what's called acid rain, which means it goes up into the ocean, into the air. It has carbon dioxide, it has hydrogen sulfide, and those and nitrogen oxide. Those three components, when it mixes with the moisture in the air, it forms sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and carbonic acid. So you have acid rain. Now, when the rain falls, it's full of acid. It falls down into your oceans. It falls down into your stream. It falls down into your gardens, in the farms, destroys everything, and you don't know what's hitting. Besides you breathing it in, and we are allowing that. When I was at EPA, we stopped that. It's prohibited. When we got into office, when we left office, you know what Exxon got out of this new government? They put a clause into the permit. When I put a clause in to say it's strictly prohibited, and we even shut down Exxon when they said their equipment wasn't working. They have a clause in that in Exxon permit to say that Exxon, you shall pollute as much as possible. You can flare as much gas as possible as long as you pay for it. So they're charging a minuscule little fee for flaring as much as you want, which flies in the face of all environmental principles, which is to protect the environment. So now the pollutants, Exxon, can pollute as much as you want, that because you can afford to pay for it, and you're making money off of it by flaring. You're making money because you're not shutting down your equipment, or you don't have to go get equipment. So you're making money off of it, and then we're bragging how much money we're collecting from this paltry fee. That's the mentality that we have in the irresponsible and lawless nature of how we're running this oil and gas industry. But from the flaring and the contamination of the water and oil spill, this is not only a Guyana problem. This here is a Caribbean problem.
Okay, brother, that we have to bring you back for sure. But I definitely, please send me that letter. I want to circulate it with my people in the Caribbean. I say, listen, send it to the political leaders for bring pressure upon them, for bring pressure upon CARICOM, because this is enough for we best interest. Big respect and thanks for being our guest today, brother. That good recommendation, brother Akko. And quickly, I never have just quickly some two of the Facebook comments today for Sunday Review. I try and make one effort for heal up with people in Jose Sandoval say, good morning, Sonia Allen say, and we believe that we are colorblind, yet racism exists all day, every day. People need to understand how racism manifests itself. So again, thanks to our brother Doc, Vincent Adams, Guyanese, Petroleum and environmental engineer. When we hear grassroots begin, just so give thanks to the family and the community we nurture for make it. Yes, brother Akko, go ahead.
So I got one comment from somebody text me, said that it seems that we are excluding the indigenous people of Guyana as part of the racial network, and also Chinese and Portuguese people.
Sound like
Uh,
somebody who I know that Guyana.
I do know there was a Chinese president at a Chong. So that was one comment I got from someone.
Fair enough. That's why we have that's why it's our inclusive process so other people could put their 2 cents in and it
Yeah.
still get in at the space of the conversation. So thanks for that 2 cents. The first one, thanks, Brother Akko. Brother Akko Mutota, thanks for being here, even though you're not in the whole give a greetings to everybody we'll meet on behalf of African descendants in the region. Anytime we get an opportunity, I tell people I stay hopeful. We're still here, the credible ones. Once we're in communication and we stay in that communication, that will matter because only the people want to save the people. Give thanks to our security guard, Shane Flowers, XTV, MCO, Alexis Belial, downstairs at Creme Radio. I believe it's Larry Guerrero. This show will repeat on our local channel at 5:30 Belize time. You could go to Facebook, XTV Belize, and YouTube, XTV Belize at any time for today's Sunday Review and listen to this conversation. Share the link. Share the link with as many people, especially the Caribbean people in the diaspora around the world. The more knowledge we have, the more we could hold ourselves and our political leaders accountable who consistently make decisions in the best interest. And one of the things we never touch on that Brother Vincent was sharing is the fear that people have in Guyana, because I asked, like, who to hold the state accountable? I'm familiar with Red Thread, but who else? So Brother Vincent, quickly, tell me why people fearful for hold the state accountable to Guyana.
Yeah, because of the the state is in control of everything, and the jobs, even the small the private jobs, they're controlled by the government. They're all connected. That's what you have in those small communities. So nobody is willing to say anything against the government, or else not only would you lose your job, but your entire family, and it happens every single day. It's a lot. Even the vice president himself, I remember several months ago, he said, well, y'all know that I'm very vindictive because he runs the GovJ. He said, you know, I could not believe he said that out of his own mouth. But it's the fear. Even the media, the guy on his weekly newspaper, on his weekly press conference, the guy terrorizes the media. And he cusses down. I mean, I'm not exaggerating here. You ask anybody he cusses down the media. This guy even taking away advertisement from the newspapers that dare to criticize his government. I know of journalists who do not go back to his press conferences because of the cussing down that he puts on them. That is why people are afraid to speak up. And that is why the diaspora is so important, and even the rest of the Caribbean should be so important. That's why we were trying to rely upon CARICOM, because we in the diaspora, we really don't have any fear because we're not dependent upon the government. The CARICOM people don't either. So that is why this is so important that this program here, to spread the word in the Caribbean so that the people can see and then bring pressure to the leaders of the Caribbean so that they can put pressure on the government of Guyana, because they have a more powerful voice than the folks in Guyana.
Thanks, brother. Again, all the people want to save the people.
People save the people.
That 10% Belize and proud of it, sir. No, tell me about maritime in Guatemala. Follow me now. This time we have here. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time